Welcome, everyone, to another edition of The Travel Show with your host, Ted Blank, Luxury Travel and Adventure. And we're in for a real treat today because have you ever sat at home and listened to The Travel Show and wondered, what's it like to be Ted Blank? What's it like, a day in the life, not only of Ted Blank, but really of a travel expert? Well, guess what? We're going to hear all about it because I'm sure you have lots of adventures to tell us about.
A day in the life of Ted Blank. That could be a book, right?
I think it could be. Yes, definitely. It's going to be a radio show that we're going to tune into.
We can do that.
Yes. So I love this topic.
Yeah. It's a good topic to discuss. I think my job is a job that comes with a lot of misunderstandings and perhaps outdated perceptions of what it is.
And perceived glamour, maybe?
And perceived glamour. And, I'm not going to lie, there are some glamorous moments. There are a lot of unglamorous moments as well. But, I think a lot of people who are my age remember the old days of the travel agency. And there used to be one on every corner.
Or every mall.
Every mall. It was a bunch of typically women sitting behind desks.
Yes.
And you'd walk in.
They'd have headsets on.
Yeah. You'd walk in, and they'd bang away on those big computers, that had the multicolored keyboards, and they would hum in the background, like a diesel generator. And then out would spit a paper airline ticket. You'd walk out the door. Or even worse, you remember the ones that they used to handwrite with the red ink on them? And so travel agencies for a long time sold airline tickets. That was really their primary business.
I didn't know that. Is that how they started?
Yeah, that's really how they started. And, train tickets before that. The first travel agencies came about to sell train tickets, essentially. And then over time, the tourism industry really started to evolve. And kind of what we know as vacation travel today came on the scene. So cruises, vacations
they didn't have
to
all
Mexico.
That back in the
Not
day?
very many. That's kind of since the 1970s.
So was the Love Boat really kind of the first?
It was a first generation cruise ship. Before that, it was people crossing the Atlantic Ocean to get from place to place before the jet airplane. And so these travel agencies existed and they made their money selling airline tickets.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because they had the only technology that you could use to actually generate an airline ticket. Well, over time, the industry changed. The internet came along. And a lot of things that someone used to get paid to do got moved to being a self-service function. So people can buy their own airline tickets now, for better or for worse. And so the industry had to really evolve. And so particularly after September 11th, there was kind of a pretty dramatic change in the travel industry, particularly on the leisure or the vacation side of things.
Because people weren't traveling as much?
No, because the model of selling airline tickets and making money, you made money, the more airline tickets you sold, the faster you could sell them. The more efficient of an order taker you were, the more money a travel agency would make. And that's really no longer the case. The term travel agent is kind of an outdated term in many ways. We call ourselves travel advisors now. And I think the difference between a travel agent and a travel advisor is kind of like the difference between a stockbroker and a financial advisor. You think of those stockbrokers, you used to call them up and you'd shout down the phone, sell 50 shares of Montgomery Wards before they go bankrupt. Well, now people don't do that. They can buy and sell trade stock online, but the demand for financial planners has really exploded. And the same is true for the travel advisor. And really, we and I focus on getting to know our customers and helping to match them up with the right trip for them. Because the technology exists that most trips can be booked by somebody with a computer. And it's not the act of actually booking the trip that's really the place where we add value or where I add value. That's in the relationship, the understanding, and being able to match someone up with the right trip.
That's a really good way of putting it because you're right. There are a lot of things that you can look at online.
But don't they always look good?
They look good and they all kind of look the same.
They all kind of look the same.
And they're not the same price. And
they're not the same price. And so what tends to happen is the internet is good at introducing price transparency. And I think sometimes people confuse that price transparency that you might see if you're buying a jar of peanut butter. Well, a 16-ounce jar of Jiffy peanut butter might cost a different price at different stores, but it's the same. It's the exact same thing. With travel, you might be comparing a jar of Jiffy peanut butter to a jar of no-name peanut butter, almost to a jar of caviar. And most of us don't know the difference. And the internet doesn't help us to figure that out. And so then the internet came along and said, well, let's have, user reviews and websites that are based on user reviews. Well, it turns out that anybody with $50 and a keyboard can generate a lot of positive reviews for anything. And so
dig into that, because I don't think people understand
No,
that.
I mean, it is really true. Most of the reviews on internet sites are not posted by actual consumers of the product.
Maybe not even actual people.
Or actual people. Yeah, they're bots. But even worse, you and I might walk into the same restaurant and you might say, oh my God, this restaurant doesn't have nachos? F. And I might walk in there and say, oh my God, I had the best caviar I've ever had.
A.
This is the best restaurant, AA+. And so, the internet can't help us understand that. And so
Our
I think,
palates.
and so a lot of what I do, a lot of what I spend my time doing is talking to people and getting to know them and getting to understand nachos, caviar, or whatever it is related to that. And so I ask questions and I listen. And that's, I think, very different than, would you like fries with that, taking orders. So that, I think, is the number one misconception that people have about a travel advisor like myself, is that we're here to take an order. And we're here to, maybe search for a lower price. Well, we can always look for prices. But if we don't know what we're looking for the price on, the price kind of doesn't matter. And I came to the conclusion myself, I think, over the last couple of years, that the biggest mistake people can make in travel is to book the wrong trip. And that's a hard mistake.
Bummer.
It's a big bummer.
Yeah, that's a terrible mistake.
You come back and you're like, wow, this was my first trip to Europe. I spent $25,000 on it. I didn't like it. That's not good. That's not good. So my number one job is that. It's to make sure that we are booking the right trip for you. Out of the 60 different cruise lines that cruise to Alaska or cruise to Europe, that we're picking the right one for you. So that's really, I think, kind of my first role. And so I spend a lot of time talking to my clients, listening to them. I do an interview with new clients to really get to understand their likes and their dislikes, their dreams, and maybe their nightmares. That's probably the most important thing that I do. Then, I spend a lot of time actually booking trips, pressing buttons and picking up the phone and calling and
putting it together.
And sometimes that's a pretty straightforward process. Sometimes there are a lot of moving pieces. And so kind of the second piece of what I do is I really work with the right travel suppliers or the right travel companies to make it happen. And so, with the cruise line, relatively straightforward. Is it a good cruise line or is it not a good cruise line? Can we rely on them to deliver what they said they're going to deliver or not? And how does that play out? But a lot of times, if I'm putting together a customized vacation for someone, I'm working with a partner who is based in that country. So in Spain or in France or in Greece or in Croatia or Costa Rica or Panama or Colombia. And to have those relationships, to have vetted those people either personally or kind of through my network of colleagues is really important because, if you're traveling, you and your husband are traveling in Colombia, you want to know that everything's going to go well. You want to know that the hotel is going to be the one that you booked. And what if something goes wrong? What if the nachos don't agree with you? And, you need to go see a doctor or someone like that. Is there someone there to help you out? And what if there's a bad storm? And that beautiful cruise you were going to take to the island of Capri in Italy can't happen. What are you going to do that day instead? So I vet and I work with those types of folks in the destinations. And so I spend a lot of time when I travel, particularly meeting those folks, getting to know them, and then making sure that they're doing what they need to do. When my clients travel in Europe and places like that, I get an update every day. They may not even know this. I don't know if I should say this on the air, but I get an update every day from many of my supplier partners telling me what happened the day before and making sure, there may be pictures of them doing things, but I know what's going on. And if, for example, they were supposed to go on a boat ride to Capri and it got canceled, we talked to them and agreed that we would do this instead, and everybody had a great time. So I'm on top of that as well. So it's really important for me to have those relationships. And again, this isn't necessarily about pointing and clicking and the actual act of booking. It's the vetting process that I do that's really important.
Well, I tease you about all the trips that you take because you do travel.
I do travel a lot.
A lot.
Yep.
But that is part of what you need to do.
It is. And it's, I travel for three reasons. One, I love to travel. So it certainly helps that I enjoy what I do. And I do have some opportunities that maybe I wouldn't otherwise have available to me. I liken it to going to a convention. It's not just going to a nice place and just enjoying. I'm always actively consuming what I'm seeing and doing so that I can come back and share that with my clients, or that I've built relationships with folks who I can work with for my clients, or I have an understanding of how something somewhere works. And I think that that's one of the wrinkles of travel, as you get beyond just going to a beach and relaxing at the beach. There's kind of a logical order in which things happen in the travel world. But it depends on where you go, and there may be very, very good reasons for it. For example, if you go to Peru and you want to go to Machu Picchu, which is that beautiful Incan ruins, it is so high above sea level that most people who get there will have high altitude sickness because of that. And so there's a very specific way to schedule that trip so that you actually go even higher than Machu Picchu first, kind of get the worst of it out of your system. And then when you get to Machu Picchu, which is the highlight of your trip, you're actually going to be in much, much better shape because you're kind of going in the right direction. Well, you can find tour companies and you can book flights and trains that will take you in either direction. It's not impossible to do that. But if your travel advisor doesn't know the difference, it can really make the difference between a great trip and a trip, where the highlight is spent being under the weather.
So when you mentioned, getting people on a trip and you're getting these reports, I'm thinking about if something does go vastly wrong.
You know who never sends me reports on how things are going?
I was going to say
the
those
airlines.
same people.
The airlines.
I bet.
No, it is, there are some things that
Out of your
unfortunately
control.
out of my control, and there are things that can just happen. Flights can be canceled and things like that.
But you are at the other end of a phone call to help people.
Or there's
if you
someone
can.
even better than me necessarily being the first line of defense. There's someone who's available to them in that destination 24/7 who can make things happen right away, as opposed to, if you're in Croatia and you call me, by the time we get that all worked out, it might be several hours. But yes, I'm there kind of as the final backstop on things to make sure that we can resolve problems as we go along. A lot of times, though, if we do it right in the planning process,
won't be problems.
those problems won't come up. There still can be hiccups, flights particularly.
Weather. Flights really throw everything.
Out of everything that I do, every trip that I book,
Okay.
99% of the complaints and the problems are related to the airlines.
And
The
do you
biggest
have
pain.
favorite airlines?
No.
Okay.
Some of them generally do better than others, but it's a very complicated business. And it's impossible for an airline to run like a Swiss watch. Things will happen and things will go wrong. I think some airlines generally do a much better job of recovering when
Like
those
we
things
found
happen.
that out with Southwest.
They were shut down this over Christmas last year for like a week. I mean, they were virtually shut down, and there was kind of no plan B. That was not good. But other airlines have had their share of problems, and oftentimes they are the airline's fault, even if they tell you they're not. But they may be the airline's fault, but they couldn't have prevented it. And so that's where I can be of assistance and help make sure, well, you know what, you're going to end up being late to get to your destination. Let's kind of rearrange things and salvage things and redirect things so that you still have a great vacation. So on kind of the negative side, I'm sort of a backstop to things. On the positive side, though, wouldn't it be nice if you got to Paris for that 40th anniversary trip of a lifetime, and instead of going to your hotel and they lost your reservation, the general manager comes down and says, well, good morning, welcome to Paris. Come with me, have a glass of champagne, and I'd love to hear how you met your husband. Or I'd love to tell you about my favorite restaurant in Paris. And I can do that, and I do that. And so those relationships that I cultivate when I travel, when I go to conventions and things like that, they're essential to me being able to do that. So it's not just a backstop in case things go wrong, but hopefully we can make that special experience just that much more
Extraordinary.
Special. Extraordinary. Exactly, extraordinary.
So when you talk to people for the first time, is that a one-time meeting, or do people's travel interests sometimes change?
Well, people's
over the
interests
years?
can certainly change.
Okay.
And it's interesting because certainly that first meeting is an important meeting because, if we're getting to know each other, that's important. And it is kind of a two-way street. I may not be everyone's cup of tea either. And so it's important that we're both comfortable with who we are, and that I am listening and that I'm providing the recommendations that they want. But I've noticed that the number one time that people's travel dreams change is when they're on a trip. And they'll come back from a trip and say, boy, we were planning to go on a river cruise in Portugal next year, but we were talking to some people and they just went to Iceland, and I think we want to go to Iceland next year. And so it is actually very, very common. I think a lot of people have a couple maybe like fixed
bucket
things
list
in their bucket list, things that are never going to go away. They may have family in Italy, family roots in Italy, and they just want to go back there and really, really experience that. So that certainly doesn't change. But a lot of times, I think if you sat down and made your bucket list when you were 30, 50 and 70, it would have changed, even if you hadn't gone anywhere in the process. And really, that's what I'm about, is making sure that when you take those bucket list type trips, that you've got, that time and that money you're investing is going to get you the experience that you want.
Oh, so anything else that you want to tell our listeners?
Well, I will say one other thing that just is kind of as I go through my days, I'm very conscious of my clients' time. And when they're traveling, none of us has enough time to do everything that we want to do. And sometimes we forget to relax when we travel. And so as I look at a cruise itinerary, as I look at a tour itinerary, or as I plan a customized trip, it's important that we build in time for people to just kind of relax and catch their breath. Sometimes I'll see cruises out there and they're, 21-day cruises with 20 ports of call. I'm like, by day 17, you're going to be dead. And then you're going to miss, because you're going to be so tired, you're going to miss the highlight because, you spent the first 16 days doing other things. And so being conscious of that time, how we best use it, but also how we make it an enjoyable and a pleasurable experience, and not just an exercise in check, it is an important part of what I do. And it's not something people ask for. Nobody comes in and says, I just want to use my time better in travel. But that's the added value that I provide as a travel advisor.
Because you do know how arduous some of these trips can be.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a person, and I've taken some very arduous trips before. I'll never forget one. I went to Cancun for the first time, and I inspected hotels. And in 7 days, we inspected 54 hotels.
No.
Yeah, and it was August, and it was 100 degrees, and it was hot. I saw a lot of hotels and a lot of hotel rooms. So all of my travel isn't necessarily a lark. It is travel for a purpose. But I understand that we all have to have time to relax and have some downtime and, uptime as well.
Absolutely. Oh, I love this. A day in the life. So I don't have to follow you around anymore?
You don't have to.
I don't? Could
Nope.
I still, though?
You could,
okay. If people don't want to follow you around but just want to meet you, how could they do that?
Yeah, it's the best way to get in touch with me is to give me a call at 651-964-8245, or you can visit my website at tedblanktravel.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter, or you can request an appointment right there online.
Great to see you. Thank you so much. The Travel Show in Ted Blank is your host on AM 1460 and FM 97.7, KDWA in Hastings. This travel show has been brought to you by Ted Blank Luxury Travel.